Hello, welcome to Eye on Africa. For your daily continental roundup, I'm Jean-Emile Jamin. Coming up on the show, with just days to go until Nigeria's head to the polls, there's one presidential hopeful aiming to break the stranglehold of the two dominant parties. France 24 speaks exclusively to Peter Obi. Then the final day of the African Union's meeting in Addis Ababa has resolved to maintain the suspension of 4 military-led countries. It comes as the bloc drives home its zero-tolerance policy for undemocratic changes of power. And finally, the Tour of Rwanda has got underway. And while some of the biggest names in cycling are taking part, the national team is determined to make its country proud. Thanks for joining us. Nigeria is gearing up for the final stretch ahead of this weekend's presidential elections. President Muhammadu Buhari is term-bound and can't run again. Unusually, there are 3 front-runners, though, this time in an election that's usually a 2-horse race between the country's 2 main political parties. Ahead of this Saturday's polls, our Africa editor, Georja Calvin-Smith, caught up with the third-party candidate who's threatening to upset the political landscape of Africa's most populous country.
I'm here in Lagos with Peter Obi, the Labour Party candidate that some polls have predicted as being in with a chance of winning key elections here in Nigeria that normally are a 2-party race between the ruling APC and the opposition PDP. Peter Obi, thanks very much for making the time to speak to France 24. Now, you are one of the front-running candidates that has done some of the least campaigning, and yet we've seen this groundswell of support for you, generally amongst younger Nigerians, a lot of it coming from online. Has that surprised you?
Not at all, because over the years, Nigerians have seen cumulative effect of leadership failure over the years. The youths and the younger population are feeling it more because they are seeing their future destroyed by leadership failure. So they are eager to take back the country and see it well served or governed more properly. And you know, at this age when information is available, they could see their counterparts in other countries and societies that are well governed and how well they are doing. So they think, why can it happen here? So seeing somebody whom they think offers that hope becomes their own.
What about your vision is different to what's come before?
Nigeria is 62 years after independence. This is the first time a party in Nigeria, which is my party, Labour Party, a presidential candidate and a vice presidential candidate will be persons born after independence. If we succeed, a generation would have come on board. And we are committed to it. With that, we're also thinking how to do things differently, how to give service. That was why, maybe that's why we're not doing it the old way of sharing money, but now coming to say, give an idea of what we're going to do, and asking people who hold us responsible for that. Like I've said, what am I going to do? This country today is insecure.
But current President Muhammadu Buhari came into power, was voted in because of his pledges to do something about the level of insecurity in Nigeria. We haven't seen much progress on that. So what would you do differently? There's
a lot to do. First, that you have the manpower across our security agencies is low. You need to increase it. Equip them properly, ensure their welfare, including proper insurance in case anything happens to them. If you secure the country today and get your farmers to go back to farm, and you support them to increase their output, you first deal with the issue of inflation. The worst form of inflation we have today is food inflation. If you curb it, you will have reversed a lot about your inflation.
And how do you feel about this last stretch in the run-up to the poll?
Well, for me, it's about Nigeria. There's no excitement because there's a lot of work. I want to see Nigerians feel a sense of pride. I'm from Nigeria. Not feeling a second-hand citizen.
Peter Obi, thank you very much for your time.
That was Nigerian presidential candidate Peter Obi speaking to France 24. The army of Burkina Faso has confirmed that at least 51 soldiers were killed on Friday when their unit was ambushed by the country's northern border. The deadly attack happened just 2 days before the official end of French military operations in the West African nation. Well, earlier I spoke to the director of the Royal African Society and former British ambassador to Burkina Faso, Nick Westcott. He warns of a deteriorating security situation in the region.
Traoré came to power on two bases. One, he was going to improve the security, which he has not yet done. But secondly, his anti-French line was key to his replacing the previous leader of the junta, General Damiba. And he has delivered on that. He has thrown out the French. Now he has to try and improve the security situation, which he promised to do. And I have no doubt that the Wagner group, if invited, if they can find any soldiers, will be in there like a shot, offering to improve the situation. But the Burkinabe governments need to be aware that Wagner group's track record in dealing with terrorists or jihadists is not strong. They failed in Burkina Faso, they failed in Mozambique. They've not really been terribly effective in CAR or in Mali, except to protect the government. So they will come, they will protect the government, but they will not protect Burkinabe citizens.
The West African Regional Bloc, along with the African Union, decided on Sunday to uphold sanctions on Guinea, Mali and Burkina Faso. It comes as a response to the recent military coups taking hold of each country. But while the sanctions have inflicted economic hardship, they've yet to trigger a return to democracy. Sam Bradpiece reports from Dakar.
Mali, Burkina Faso and Guinea have all undergone coups since 2020. In fact, Mali and Burkina Faso have seen 2 military coups each. By this measure, West Africa is one of the most unstable regions in the world, and the regional bloc, ECOWAS, is worried about this instability spreading further. That's why they announced over the weekend that they would maintain sanctions on these 3 countries and even introduce new ones banning travel for certain senior officials. But some analysts are not convinced that sanctions are the surest way to accelerate the return to democracy.
Donc pourquoi pas ne pas débuter par des négociations?
Why not negotiate first, rather than impose sanctions that will hurt the local population? These sanctions will only generate sympathy for the juntas. It will reinforce support for these military governments and have no political impact.
At a weekend summit of the African Union, the chairperson of the African Union Commission also raised concerns about the effectiveness of sanctions and said that new strategies should be developed to prevent the backsliding of democracy on the African continent. For now, though, as long as tough economic sanctions remain in place in countries like Mali, Burkina Faso and Guinea, civil society, ordinary citizens will be hurt just as much, if not more, than the regimes that these sanctions are looking to target.
Now, it's the continent's biggest cycling event. This Sunday, the 15th edition of the Tour of Rwanda began in Kigali. Faced with better equipped and well-prepared opposition teams, the humble Rwandan unit, though, must now prove itself this year before the World Championships in 2025. Clément Diroma was following the team.
Eric Manizibayo is one of the most promising Rwandan cyclists of his generation. He's going through his final training preparation, climbing hills with the national team. He's now just a few days before the Tour of Rwanda, one of the continent's most famous races.
We exercise often so that the body adapts to the extreme conditions here. We're now just finishing the intensive part, so the coach asked us to only do 2 hours of cycling today.
Cyclists train in the north of the country at an altitude of more than 2,000 meters. It's grueling, but the team is under pressure to deliver. They haven't reached the podium since 2018. This could be the year they taste a home victory. Eric was already well placed in 2022.
I really like this bike. I want to take this model for the Tour. This year must be different from last year. It was so difficult to win a stage in 2022. We weren't too confident yet, but the experience we've acquired will serve us well this year. For the moment, I feel really confident, and I will win at all costs.
During the Tour, local riders must face off against Western athletes who are often better prepared and equipped. With the severe COVID restrictions in Rwanda, the national team had fallen behind. But for the past year, it's been doubling its efforts. Nathan, the team's coach, was one of the first professional cyclists in the history of the small country. He's hopeful that the hard work will pay off.
We had more races and more training because after COVID, we went in the Europe competition. So our level, they go up.
Eric and his teammates are already thinking about climbing the top positions on the Tour. But their sights are also set on the World Championship in 2025, hosted by Rwanda for its first edition on the African continent.
Well, let's see what Rwanda can come up with. Of course, stage 2 has wrapped up already. Well, finally, we'll just leave you with these sights and sounds from Benin's first International Arts Festival, a truly magnificent event which wrapped up after 6 days on Sunday. Take a look.
But I'm calling for the defense of Ukraine, not for jihad, because Ukraine is a secular country.
They are Ukrainian and Muslim, mostly Tatars from the Crimea. Faced with the Russian invasion, they're fighting on every front. Though they make up only 1% of the population, many are involved in the war.
Before, Muslims were accused of being terrorists, but now society has become more mature.
Other Muslims are fighting alongside them, Chechen refugees.
I'll never forgive the Russians for what they have done in my country. I think that Europe and the entire world have now understood who the real terrorists are.
Watch Reporters, Ukraine, Muslims on the front line, on France 24 and France24.com.